Welcome to the Not Just Ads show, where B2B brands learn how creator-led content drives pipeline, builds trust, and gains long-term brand equity. Each episode, we talk to founders and marketers and creators using content to build reputation and lead their category. On today's show, I'm joined by David Walsh. David is a founder and CEO of Limelight, the first platform uniquely designed to connect B2B creators, experts, thought leaders, and niche voices with brands aiming to scale and reach and influence and drive business impact. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. We're in Barcelona and I was meant to be on a family holiday, but we're now recording a podcast.
Exactly.
I'm excited.
Thanks for joining. So I think for the listeners, one thing that's really interesting is that you've built this company. I checked that you have over, how many brands do you have live on the platform at the moment?
Well, don't ask a difficult question to begin with.
It's a significant amount though.
Hundreds.
I read it was over 300 brands and over 2,000 creators. And the really interesting thing for me is that you did that with a team of
4 people.
4 people.
Yeah.
So there'll be enterprise organizations and different people working in and leaders and so on listening to the show. How the hell did you manage to do that with 4 people?
You know, honestly, the truth is, we saw a market opportunity. We decided this product needs to exist. We decided that thought leaders in B2B is new and nascent. There's so many creators on LinkedIn just publishing content on an ongoing basis who've built trusted audiences. And there was just a massive market need in my understanding was. And so, you know, how do we get to a couple of hundred? I would say painful to begin with, to get going. But it was an indication that we were onto something, that there was a need and there was demand. Honestly, all of the companies pretty much come through my content on LinkedIn. So I've been posting content on LinkedIn for 5 days a week for, 15 months now. Took my following from 6,000 followers to 32,000 followers. And the majority of companies find out about Limelight through either my content online or customers interviewing and introducing other customers. So, it feels crazy to look back and think now we've got a couple of hundred people signed up. At the beginning, we were just hoping for one. You know, when you go out and build a technology venture, you just hope that you get a couple of customers. Now it's starting to, snowball. And I think that's a part of it is the market and network effects. So the creators introducing more brands, the brands introducing more creators. And, the first few months though, Marcus, were so painful. So I'm happy to be here now.
Great. So just to unpack that a little bit, because from what you mentioned about that, a lot of the customers and a lot of the businesses coming through your content on LinkedIn. So that's kind of, would that be fair to say then that's kind of like a sales channel for such a small organization? That's kind of the driver of the business at the moment and bringing in that business, no?
Yeah, 100%. Well, truthfully, you got to practice what you preach. So me publishing content online was me becoming a creator. And so, yeah, it's absolutely the biggest sales mechanism. And honestly, I believe that the majority of companies should have a team of creators publishing content on a regular basis, some of which should be the employees themselves and the executive team. But make no mistake, it was deliberate. We said, we're going to create content to drive revenue, to drive eyeballs, to drive users, and then to drive revenue. And we've been successful so far. Still a long way to go. We're still early, but having a lot of fun building it.
Great. Yeah, I'm just reading a stat here that I saw LinkedIn recently released a report on creators on the platform, and it was about 87%. They were saying that B2B buyers say creator content influences. 38% of them say that it even pushes them to contact sales. So there's a shift here. If we look at this, we were having a chat about maybe 6 or 7 years ago, it would be the typical B2B play would be a gated white paper. You have to give your email address. And whereas that shift now is more content driven, people are buying or are trusting more content and they're making purchasing decisions based off the back of that. Do you think this is kind of generational in terms of this is mostly for the Gen Zs, or is it something that actually this is a complete shift in terms of how people see and how they consume content? And how do you see that going forward?
I'll make a bold statement. I think, honestly, the future of all B2B marketing is going to be creator-led. I think it's going to be people want to follow people. They don't want to follow corporations. I think historically, all corporations have had massive budgets to spend on paid ads and competing on keywords with all of their competitors. And it's just a logo and like a fake image. Whereas now people want authenticity. They want to see the actual people behind the scenes, or they want to see the employees talking about the product. So creator-led marketing, in my opinion, is going to be part of every single company. And I think this is a massive shift. And it's partly because of the generation themselves. Like you mentioned Gen Z, like now there are a huge percentage of people who have budgets at B2B companies are actual Gen Z. Like that's their generation. They're used to feeling, that they get to know people and that they get to buy from people. So I think it's a generational shift, and I think it's going to change, this is a huge, moment in time for marketing in general, and bringing faces to the names of corporations is critical and will continue to be the thing that differentiates most brands.
So let's say some traditional B2B companies that are like they have a significant marketing budget, but they're really only maybe stepping their toes into kind of like the creator-led B2B play. And on one side, let's say they have a very well-known brand and it's a traditional business. On the other side, they see that there's a huge untapped opportunity for kind of creating content targeted at their ICPs. What's the next step? Like if they're to come to you, what do you think would be like a first play that would be beneficial for them?
Yeah, so bigger organizations, like firstly, you need to find the right types of creators, the ones that have the right audience and the ones that you can tap into and that speak, they have the right authenticity. They can talk about a product as a subject matter expert. So finding the right creators is like step number one. Like step number two is actually, how do you reach out to them? Like, do you hire a contractor or delegate it to somebody on your marketing team to go and do outbound messaging? Like, what are you going to actually say to these creators? Like the creators today have a lot of inbound interest and demand. So they can be quite choosy. So it's about like, how do you position your company as like investing in creators for the long term? Because in my experience, like most creators don't want to do single post engagements. They want to be part of the brand. They want to be part of the marketing team. They want to be an extension to your marketing team. So in answer to your question, like it starts with like, where do we get started? And let's also just take a step back, Marcus. Like B2B influence marketing is new. It's nascent. Like most companies haven't done it. Maybe they've used an agency and they didn't have a good experience, or maybe they did it themselves and they realized it's actually a lot of work. So a lot of the times it's educational. Like what's the budget that you want to allocate to this? Make sure it's significant so that you can run enough experiments to test enough content and enough creators, and then figure out what works. And so it starts with like, don't just dip your toe and try a couple of posts with a handful of creators and expect there to be a huge revenue uptick. Like that's not realistic. So a lot of the companies that I would work with, we actually turn down that don't, want to invest, enough into this to make it reality. And then in B2B, Marcus, the other thing is like the buying journey is quite long. In consumer, it's very transactional, right? You can have 1 million followers on Instagram, take a picture of yourself wearing sunglasses on a beach, get conversion rate of 0.5%, and the sunglasses company will be happy, right? In B2B, the purchasing decision is a lot longer. Could be a couple of weeks, could be a couple of months. So because of that, you need to be able to demonstrate that you need to give it enough time. You need to invest enough resources, and then you need to do enough testing. And then over time, you can start to realize that there's a huge uptick in revenue and in people finding out about your business through creators. And we can get more into the revenue attribution and how you measure all of that. But like to begin with, it's a new industry. Education is important. Following other companies that are doing it well is obviously a good thing. And then you just want to be selective with who you work with, because like any new industry, everyone does different things.
Yeah. So in terms of like some of the brands that you're working with, what do you see in terms of like kind of what type of content creator actually kind of moves somebody from scroll to say like an action, in terms of like with the different brands that you're seeing and the creators that you're working with? Like, I know this is quite a broad question, but is there any kind of trends you see of like what's resonating with their kind of like buying committee and so on?
Yeah, it's a difficult question because with content, there's lots of types of content, lots of flavors, right? Yeah. And there's top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, right? If you're going to ask a creator to go and sell aggressively your product and start with like, here's all the features and benefits of my amazing product, guess what? It's going to get no reach. No one's going to be interested, right? With creators, it needs to be storytelling. You need to actually like, tell a story that's authentic about solving a specific problem, layering in your product or your business. And so a lot of the times the best performing content is like authentic content that the creator's telling a story about solving a specific problem and layers in your business and your product as the solution. But it's not starting with the product. Like Have you ever seen like a Nike ad back in the day? They would have had like all about the product and they would have been showing you the shoes, for example. Today, it's like the complete opposite.
Yeah.
It's a lifestyle. The first goal of any piece of content is to grab attention. So with LinkedIn, for example, the hook is the most important. The first couple of lines, like you need to get the attention of the people. So people, you'll see some wild posts if you go to LinkedIn where, you know, the first 2 lines are just like, that you cannot say that on LinkedIn. Well, there's a reason that they're doing that. It's to stop you. It's to stop the scroll and it's to get you to read more because that's what the algorithm favors. It's how long do people look at the post, and the first few lines are essential. So you want to find the right balance, to be honest. Like that's important, but it can't be flat. It can't be boring, and it can't be too salesy to begin with.
Yeah, and in saying that, then as well, like in terms of working with, say, big brands, small to medium-sized SMB brands and so on, with that tone, is there like, do you see anything of like B2B brands getting it wrong when they go initially? And like, what can other brands learn from that? Any examples? I'm not asking you to name brands, but maybe you can give me some examples in terms of like any flops where it just went like, okay, they should not do that.
Well, like anything, right? It's new. So like there's always, it's experimentation. There's always going to be stuff that doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
It's about limiting the exposure to that. I'd say the biggest one that we see is corporations trying to control the narrative and trying to tell creators what to write.
Yeah.
Like that's their job. They write content for a living. They know their audience. They know how to tell stories. You need to give them the creative freedom to be able to create the content and make it authentic and make it resonate. If the brands overreach with freedom of content, often the post just falls flat because immediately the reader who's been reading this person's content every day for the last 3 years knows that this doesn't feel right. This isn't in their voice.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Content, teams over kind of, I suppose, like telling them what to write.
Yeah.
I'd say number 2 is like finding the wrong creators. Like a lot of the times they just go for the people who have the largest following. Like, let me go after somebody who has 250,000 followers and they say like, that's going to get the best results. Like often that's not the case in B2B. The best creators are the smaller niche creators because they have more influence and they're more authentic. So going after the wrong creators and going after like high follower count is the number 2, I would say, in terms of like lack of performance.
Yep.
So for example, a company will come spend $5,000 on one post with somebody with 250,000 followers and be like, hey, why didn't that drive 10 demos? It's like, because that person's posted about 3 brand partnerships in the last 3 weeks or even the last 3 days. And so that's probably number 2. And there's many other stories I could tell you, but like every company's different. Where the person that's in charge of influencer marketing at the company often is a different job title, whether it's the brand team or the paid ads team, they're optimizing for different things. So, I would just say like, know what your budget is, be willing to experiment and be open to getting the creators to allow them to have the creative freedom to create content, and then give it enough time, to actually measure the results. Like often don't just do one post with a creator or else it's just going to seem inauthentic. Like you want them to be posting consistently about your product like 3, 4, 5 times over the space of like 6-week period, then analyze the results and see what comes back.
So consistency is key, no?
Consistency is key. Actually, sorry, I should also say like the best performing campaigns are the ones that are really always consistent and always on. Like Clay is a great example of that. Yeah. That's a company that has exploded. And a lot of that is through their creator channels and creator partnerships. And they have one of the most powerful creator programs in the world today. We're happy they were our first ever customer and we built the product alongside them. And so they've done a great job. And their whole thing is consistency, consistently getting posts out from creators on a regular basis. So Clay is at the top of the search results.
Yeah.
And I think consistency is really, really important with creator marketing.
Yeah. One of the things, B2BI Institute and LinkedIn, they did some research and it was around like how, there's only actually 5% of people in B2B that are actually in market. There's a 95% of people that are not yet in market, which makes sense given the long sales cycles and so on. But also part of that research, they looked at like that there was a lot of hidden buyers. So these are like people that we don't necessarily think of, but that actually has an impact when it comes to the buying committee. So it could be either somebody in HR or in legal or somebody like this. When you see like kind of best in class, you mentioned Clay, do you see them creating content that actually target like specific buyer personas within the buying committee? Or is it more kind of like broad, or what do you see? Maybe not Clay, but like companies that are like best in class at that they know who their buying committee is and they're really kind of like doubling down on the content piece. do you see examples of that, of like, what would you say that they do it best in class?
Well, in today's world, when you're buying a product, everyone is, involved in like, not always involved in the final decision, but they're involved in like being aware of the product. So it's always helpful to be aware of the brand. So the pieces of content that we see that go live, like, I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to focus exclusively on a specific job title. There's different types of content, like the tactical content, which is bottom of funnel. Like, let me actually demo how we solved a problem and show you exactly how it works. That will be very targeted at a specific like persona.
Sure.
But for the most part, most companies 80% of the time are going for like mid-level, middle of funnel, talking about different problems in the industry and talking about the solution and then layering in your product. So the best way to use influencers is to get people to become aware of your product. And that could be anyone at the organization. Without awareness, it's harder to sell. But when it comes to like targeting specific job titles, like I'd say it's only 20% of the time, 20% of the content that would be focused on that. Revenue attribution is also really difficult too, right? Like you need to have a good system in place to be able to track that and know what the performance is like.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that was kind of a follow-up question as well then, in terms of like, the way now, especially as well with like kind of the geopolitical situation with tariffs and everything, every marketing budget is getting scrutinized. Like, what would you say to somebody that's, that they want to sign off or they want to do something like this, but that their budget is going to be scrutinized and they're going to have to come back with some kind of, return on investment or something to say that like that they got something back from this, even though sometimes that doesn't make sense because you're looking at a sales cycle that's maybe 18 months and you're expecting a return in 3 months, so it doesn't always make sense. But like, what do you say to brands that are like, look, we need to get some metrics or we need to get some data in order to see if this is effective or not? What, like, you off camera, you give me some examples. Is there anything else that you could share? Like,
yeah, well, I'll start with saying like the thesis of why I launched this whole business was that digital ads are becoming less effective. Like, what would you rather do? Spend a couple of $100,000 to compete on keywords with all of your competitors and try stand out from the crowd? And it's just getting more saturated, more noisy and more expensive, and customer acquisition costs are going through the roof. Or are you better spending $100,000 with 20 creators creating content every day, once a week, about your product, about your brand, and doing it consistently? The better return on investment is going to be working with the creators, right? Now, measuring that is tough. It's difficult, right? So you definitely have to give it enough time. For us at least, we're trying to build out a lot around the leads component. So like when a creator creates content, we're actually looking at who's interacting on that content. We're segmenting that by ICP and we're sending it back to the company and saying, hey, of these 100 posts that went live, we generated, 10,000 leads. Here are the people's names, job title, company size. And then they can use that data to realize where in the sales process were these people, where do they touch the content? So yes, they came through they came through a paid ad, for example. They clicked on Google, they became a customer. Well, actually, what we're able to do is historically look back over the last 6 months and say, well, they interacted with these creators' content at these moments in time throughout the buying journey, and these individuals at the company interacted with them. That's to be able to show influenced pipeline. Now, revenue attribution is very challenging in B2B because it's so nuanced and there's long sales cycles. We're able to provide a lot more data, a lot more information, and then they can compile it together and tell a more holistic picture. So it's not just about how many likes on a post did I get, or what was the impression count on that post. It's like, can we actually collect who's looking at the post, who's engaging on that post, and then over time collect enough information to be able to demonstrate that this was really valuable. Yeah, LinkedIn on the boosted posts now, they have a thing on paid ads as well, but where you can see dwell time. So you can see how much dwell time there was on a particular post. So that's something else that and then with the thought leadership as well, that boosted posts, it's another way to kind of like add on to that as well. So yeah, well, Marcus, you mentioned it, like one of the biggest things that unlocked a huge revenue opportunity for us was that LinkedIn now do thought leadership ads that doesn't have to be an employee, right? So anyone can create content. And then if you get the approval of that author, you can actually repurpose that content into a paid channel and paid ad. That's huge.
Yeah.
Like every company should be doing that. Like find somebody with a trusted audience who has an, authority and who's, creates the type of content that you want and that you like, and get them to post content consistently. And then the posts that perform the best in the organic newsfeed will also be the ones that resonate the most in a paid channel. So put ad spend behind the post to retarget your audience, and that's performs incredibly well. Now you can take a piece of content that instead of it just going up into the newsfeed and up into the algorithm, and then kind of tapering down after a week, you can put ad spend behind that, get super targeted on who you're looking to show this ad to.
Yeah.
And then guess what? With LinkedIn, as you know, once you do a thought leadership ad, you can track revenue all the way through.
Yeah.
So, I definitely recommend working with a group of creators and then turning some of those organic posts into paid ads and then testing that, because that channel, for us at least, we've shown that it's 10x more impactful than some traditional paid channels. Yeah,
definitely. Another question then around, like, do you think brands are under investing in the middle of the funnel? So like we hear a lot about, brand. I think like if we look at now, we're kind of entering into, I suppose 10 years ago it was like digitalization for B2B, having a website, setting up your CRM and all that. Then you went into kind of like gated white papers and so on. Now we're in the era of like B2B content creators and so on. In the last probably 5 years or so, it was like kind of that performance play. You're driving traffic to download a white paper and then the lead goes into the system and so on. But then by the time that's going into the system, they may have forget why they filled in the lead form and so on. What I'm wondering now is, do you think like brands, we see that there's a big brand play, but are brands, whether it's SMBs or big enterprise brands, are they under investing in the messy middle, as we call it, in terms of like that long sales cycle, which can be 18 months? Is there an underinvestment in the middle of the funnel in terms of branding?
I mean, absolutely. Of course there is. I mean, especially when there's more pressure than ever for marketeers to deliver results. What do they go to? Like if you're told, hey, it's more important than ever that this money gets a strong return on investment, that signals, where they go to the things that have worked historically, like bottom of funnel, like very like paid channels, paid ads that work extremely well and that you can kind of track all the way through. Well, that just becomes saturated. So like my experience is all brands should be investing in more middle of funnel content. Today's consumer wants to look at the brand, the people at the brand, like the employees and the creators promoting the product, as subject matter experts who are going to help you to solve this specific problem that you have. If they're not looking at your brand that way and they're not looking at, your team that way, then you've missed out a huge market opportunity. Yeah. So I'd say all companies are underinvesting in middle of funnel, in my opinion. I actually think it's probably the biggest opportunity is to take a team of make a group of your employees become subject matter experts and then get a team of creators to help amplify that content and support them. That for me is probably the new wave of marketing. Like I think in 2026, the majority of companies will have a team of probably 5 or 10 individuals at the company that they're incentivizing to create content to become subject matter experts. And at the same time, concurrently, they're working with creators to amplify that.
So that's a really interesting point you make, because the opportunity is there. We can see that there is a business impact. It can be difficult maybe to measure if you're looking at it as like a like for like with like kind of like on a CRM and so on. But there is a business impact there. But let's say I'm a CRO and I have a sales team, and now you're saying, okay, become a subject matter expert, target these people. How can you sell that internally in order to actually to say, look, we can get a return on this, and if we're already stretched within 3 to 6 months, like the next 2 quarters, you're saying the salespeople should be focused on this. And I know I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here, but like this is a conversation probably a lot of people that are having, they're maybe more forward thinking, but then others that are like going, look, we have to think in the next 3 to 6 months.
Well, I'll tell you, like from my experience, specifically from new customers that are coming to us, where do they find out about us? Most of the time, it's, as I mentioned, through my content, but it's also through seeing competitors doing this. So when you think about a new market where like penetration's at, like, in my opinion, 3 to 5% of companies actually doing this well, there's always going to be 5% of companies that are actually using these creators and doing this content. So like selling it to internal team members often comes back to just look at your competitors. There's people in your industry that are going to start to do this and they're starting to do it well, and then they want to replicate that. So, I think it's important to realize in new industries, in new channels that are just starting out, often what happens is the first early movers get a bit of an advantage, and then every competitor sees other competitors doing it, and then they realize, wait a second, we should be doing that too. Where do we start? And that's where they come to us. Like a lot of the times they're coming to Limelight and they're saying, hey, we actually saw our competitors doing this. I'm ready to sign up immediately. Can we replicate what they're doing? So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but I would say like, because it's becoming more normal and more natural and more ongoing, find the companies in your industry and your niche that are doing this well and replicate them.
Yeah. What do you think in terms of though, like what, and I'm going to get slightly tactical, but like what should they do exactly? Like, okay, could sign up for Limelight. You can obviously connect them with creators and so on, but like, how should they think about that in terms of like subject matter experts? Should they be looking at like, okay, I have different ICPs, or should it be a more of a middle funnel approach where you're trying to create that awareness to a broader audience? Or like, what's the best play that you've seen across the different sectors that you work with?
Yeah, so often it's often a company comes to us with an objective and we get clear on like, what's the goal, what's the objective? And then after that, you're like, okay, well, here's the different strategies that we can use. Part of that will be, let's run a campaign that's very top of funnel to capture attention. And it doesn't need to be incredibly tactical, but it will gather attention quickly. And at the same time, let's run a middle of funnel or a bottom of funnel campaign that's a little bit more product oriented, a little bit more sales oriented. So answer your question, like, what do the companies do? Well, you have to, one, find the creators that you want to work with. It's difficult to do on LinkedIn. It's almost impossible to actually search the database and find, creators that have high quality content that get a lot of engagement and that you can search by different filters. So that's a lot of the times what our product ends up helping out with. So finding those creators. Then you need to come up with your campaign, decide on the strategy, and run enough experiments. So often that's like, let's choose 20 creators. Let's get a budget of $20,000. Let's, start with 10 posts, for example, and then let's start to experiment on what's working and what's resonating. And a lot of the times the creators are actually really great marketeers and they're offering a lot of advice on how to sell a product. Like a lot of adjacent value comes from working with creators where they actually start to tell stories about, using your product, and you realize there's actually like we could reuse this content. We could reuse this, this piece of advice or this way they're telling something. So, get started early, get started soon, copy the competitors, and, try find the right creators that you want to work with. And honestly, give it enough budget and give enough time.
Yeah, great. Predictions for the future. You made one at the start, but I'd like to see in terms of like, what do you think over the next 18 months in terms of where this space is headed, and in terms of metrics as well, of like, do you think there's going to be more of an evolution now that we see more of a focus on kind of B2B content? Will the evolution come as well as where there's going to be more of a tangible way to measure outcome?
Yeah.
Or any other predictions you have either?
I mean, I have so many predictions about the marketing space. Like, I honestly believe that we are at the very early innings of B2B influencer marketing. Like, a handful of companies in your niche are probably doing it today. I think that's going to become the normal. I think it's going to skyrocket. I think there's going to be more and more content that's being sponsored, and that's, people are aware that it's sponsored content. So I would say, like, my prediction for the future is that there's going to be more people creating content in business channels, creating newsletters, creating follower accounts on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on YouTube. There's been more content creators being subject matter experts with a business lens of their content than ever before. We're seeing that today. A lot of consumer creators are actually coming to B2B channels and creating content themselves. So I think there's a more supply, which means more ad space. At the same time, there's more demand, which is being driven by the fact that they see their competitors doing it. The fact that, as the market starts to evolve, you realize that if this is a new channel I should be investing in, why am I doing it? So I just think that it's going to be really exciting the next 12 to 18 months to see this industry and category explode. And then when it comes to measurability, it's getting way more intelligent and way, way smarter. Like, now we're able to actually take an enormous amount of data and cross-reference your pipeline, your sales pipeline, and be able to show influenced pipeline. We're also able to take that data and do warm outbound, where we can say, hey, you interacted with a piece of content from this creator, 2 weeks ago. Maybe you're interested in a webinar. Maybe you're interested in, signing up to a demo. So this warm outbound with content or with context is what every single marketeer is looking for. In fact, relevancy is what every marketeer is looking for in the age of AI, because everything's always on, and like AI SDRs are just spamming inboxes. One way to stand out from the crowd is just, use your content that people are interacting with and use that as in your warm outreach. So we see a lot of companies like load in thousands of leads into their, email nurturing campaign with like a relevant piece of context at the beginning that feels very like they're aware that you're in market. So I think there's massive opportunities in this. I think more and more companies are going to do it. And again, what would you be better doing? Spending more money on paid ads that's just getting more expensive, or trying something new and reallocating that ad spend to this channel. So a lot of the times that companies come to us with an idea and then they see it work, they get excited about it. Their executive team gets excited about it. Their board of directors get excited about it. They start to see the company being published and being talked about more regularly. Everyone wants that. Yeah. And then make it measurable. Well, then that's when you'll start to reallocate ad spend to these creator channels. And we're seeing that happen today.
Great. David, thanks very much for joining the show.
Well, thanks for having me on. That was awesome.
Great.
Really appreciate it.
Cheers.